This week on the show, we'll be talking with George Neville-Neal about the brand new FreeBSD journal and what it's all about. After that, we're going to have a tutorial on how to track the stable and current branches of OpenBSD and what those are. And of course, answers to all your BSD questions and the latest headlines, only on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode number 22, Journal News Updates, recorded January 29th, 2014. Hi, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us today on this very, very cold day for a lot of us in the country, and if you're in North America in particular. But we are here. Hopefully you don't hear the heaters running in the background, but we'll try to pretend like we're not affected here, even though I'm wearing extra layers. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get to your headlines because people have been actively working on a lot of stuff this last week. There's a lot of cool news. But first up, I guess this one's going to have a lot of stuff we have to talk about. The FreeBSD quarterly status report, which just hit. So what's this one about? I guess Gabor sent that out the other day.
In charge of hounding everybody to put together the quarterly status update, and it's huge. In total, there are 37 sub-reports that made up the report of what happened between October and December of 2013, and it basically covers every part of the system. There's an update on Powell's audit disti, which securely distributes audit logs to multiple servers, so that if you keep your audit logs on the server, then if that server is compromised, you can't trust those audit logs. So this system distributes them cryptographically and keeps them secure. And he's upgrading it so that instead of just using checking the server's certificate fingerprint, it'll use full PKI and allow you to use client-side certificates and revocation and all the stuff.
Oh, that's cool. Is that in head already?
Plus support for TLS 1.2 and perfect forward security. And it's expected to be completed by the beginning of February. So any day now, that should go into head.
Okay, so we'll be going in here soon. That's cool. Looking forward to that.
They also...
I imagine that's something they want on their build clusters and stuff, too.
Yeah. They also imported updates to the base GCC. While it's still stuck at 4.2.1, they imported a bunch of changes from Apple so that the GCC will be more compatible with Clang, because the Clang and base can't get all the way better until we get rid of GCC, but we can't get rid of GCC because it's still used for ARM. And so a bunch of new features into the old GCC so that it'll be more compatible and also be able to enhance FreeBSD support for Apple's Grand Central Dispatch system, which is cool.
Oh, okay.
And they got merged from head back into stable 9 as well. And then the next update is actually the one I wrote about ZFS boot support in BSD install. And it just describes the work that myself, Devin Teskey, and Warren Block did to improve the installer over that period from October to December. And that got into FreeBSD 10, and we kind of talk a little bit about what we're planning to add to it in the future.
Okay.
That's
cool. I'm looking through some of the desktop bits here, too. I guess there's some GNOME information about mate going in the ports tree and working on getting GNOME 3 in there eventually, too. There's some issues they're still fixing up, getting Kyra updated, etc. But I guess KDE also mentions they're working on Qt5 coming into the tree, which, as a Qt developer, that makes me excited. Need that.
They also mention Capsicum and Casper, which are the sandboxing systems. CBSD, which is yet another jail management framework, but one specifically designed to use the hierarchical resource accounting, virtual networking, ZFS, CARP, and HAST. So it's a little bit kind of, rather than jails on one system, more jails as a platform for stuff. It'd be interesting. Their main task is translating their documentation into English. There's a note about Colin's panic mail tool, update from the cluster bin team, the core team, which talks about all the stuff they've worked on, and also mentioning that Jordan Hubbard, who was one of the co-founders of FreeBSD, is now a source committer again. He's back to working on FreeBSD, as well as being the project manager and release engineer for FreeNAS over at IX Systems.
Yeah. He got his commit bit pulled out of storage in the cold freeze, and it's active again. That's cool.
There's also a note here about the group from SemiHalf is working on getting FreeBSD host support into OpenStack and OpenContrail. So OpenStack is basically a cloud hosting system, and it makes use of a couple of different virtualization platforms, and they're trying to get bhyve as one of those supported platforms. So you can use FreeBSD servers with bhyve as the host machines for virtual machines.
Okay.
FreeBSD support on the QB board 1 and 2, which are little ARM devices, the Freescale MX processor, the Freescale Vybrid processor, and other newer ARM boards. The ports management team talks about the new package infrastructure with signing and all that fun stuff.
How that works.
The Postmaster team mentions some changes to mailing lists, new mailing lists, old ones, etc. Python got some updates. The release engineering team managed to get 10 out the door, although not until mid-January, so it's not quite covered in the December status report. But Giulio Marino talks about the new FreeBSD test suite and all the work he put into that. It's one of the biggest entries in there. Colin's got the status update for EC2, talking about running, vanilla head on Amazon EC2 and doing away with needing the Windows license. Justin Gibbs and Roger Monet have update on using FreeBSD inside of Zen, so as a guest. So improvements there, sponsored by Citrix and SpectraLogic. Alexander Motin's got the status update on his fine-grained cam locking that we talked a little bit about after EuroBSDCon. And that was committed to 10 stable and will be included in FreeBSD 10.1. And that allows FreeBSD's CAM and GOM layers to get up to 1 million IOPS per second. Sponsored by IX Systems.
That one by IX, yep.
And Adrian Chad, everybody's favorite wireless guy, made a bunch of improvements to the IWN driver, which is the main Intel wireless NIC, which now has better support for 802.11n and new hardware support for 3 sets of hardware.
Oh, cool.
So Konstantin Blausov has been working on updating the Intel graphics chipset. We were all happy to see that i915 KMS driver come in, but now that it's in, there's about a year and a half worth of bug fixes that have been done at Intel that can be imported in as well.
Basically getting us up to date with the upstream Linux code.
And so they're working on that. In particular, it will include support for the new Haswell and Valley View processors.
Nice. And I guess Ivy Bridge has been updated as well, or is going to be when they commit it.
Although the addition of several features which require the Xorg update and new Mesa are also planned.
Okay.
Konstantin Blausov is also working on some stuff with IOMMU and VTD, so improved support in head and stable 10 for making use of the Intel virtualization features for hardware pass-through, which is sponsored by the FreeBSD Foundation. Craig Rodriguez is working on Jenkins, which is a continuous integration testing platform. And he's also looking at using bhyve for that, so that's interesting. The important one was the native iSCSI stack. Between October and December, they worked focused on performance and scalability. The target and initiator now spread the load over multiple kernel threads, so it can use multiple processors, and the locking was optimized to reduce contention. And so on multi-core machines, much better performance now, which is kind of a requirement if you're going to be doing iSCSI, right?
Yep. And don't forget the UEFI boot stuff.
There was some progress on that, and also a new auto mounter. Research and prototyping for the new Auto FS was imported. Or that project was started. It's not finished yet, but work in progress.
Sure.
And the FreeBSD Foundation goes on to talk about their stuff. They sponsored projects like Capsicum, Casper, and the IOMMU stuff. The Capsicum, Casper, and IOMMU stuff was finished last quarter. They're still in progress on iSCSI, the network stack layer 2 modernization, UEFI boot, and the updated virtual terminals, the Nucon stuff. And they also started the Automounter and Intel Graphics driver update projects. Plus, they continued their work on the FreeBSD journal, which we'll talk about a bit later in the show. They also sponsored, organized, and ran the Bay Area Developers Summit, which was kind of around the same time as the 20th anniversary party, I think. They attended VBSDCon, the Open ZFS Developers Summit, went to All Things Open, NC and Lisa, sponsored the FreeBSD 20th anniversary party, which you and I went to. That was much fun.
That was cool.
Attended the ICANN meeting in Buenos Aires and gave a presentation about their change from using bind to using unbound. Met with a bunch of companies and discussed their use of FreeBSD, what they would like to see supported in FreeBSD, and assist with collaboration between them and the project so that more of their code can come up into FreeBSD. They mentioned they bought that 40-core server from IX Systems and located it at Centex, which is a sponsor of the project, and they're using that to test scalability up to 80 cores, since people are starting to get hardware that big now. We have to make sure everything works right.
Yeah.
And they got a second rack at Centex for extra hardware. And they received a commitment from VMware to get BSD licensed drivers for all the VMware stuff, and also VMware is committed to being a silver level sponsor every year. They also got signed up as a Google Compute Engine trusted tester, so that they can push FreeBSD into Google Compute Engine so that you can use it on that cloud as well as Amazon. They funded the project to produce the white paper, managed services using FreeBSD from New York Internet. We covered that when it came out. And they produced their regular semi-annual newsletter. And they also some performance improvements to the memory allocator and RPC and NFS stuff. So the performance of ZFS and NFS was suboptimal in FreeBSD, and a bunch of work was done to improve that. So that's some quite interesting news. And also there was a big update to Wine for FreeBSD.
Switched to Clang and stuff, it looks like, right?
So that'll be quite useful.
Yeah, Wine's one of those things that's been getting progressively better and better as the years have gone by.
So that's a lot for one news story, but that's...
Man, that's going to make all those people who are like, you talk too much about FreeBSD really loud.
Well, it's because there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot going on. But not to leave others out. Our next news article, OpenBSD's hackathon report. See, so we're getting around here. So I guess recently they held one of their hackathons in New Zealand. So they had 15 developers gathered there in a room, sit and write code for a few days, which is just a cool idea. I think we should do that
more. We have a hackers lounge at the conferences, and a little bit of code, or
this is more formal,
a little bit of code might get written or problem solved and stuff discussed, but locking them in a room and be like, here's your food and beer, and you can't leave until the code's done.
I would propose tying that into like BSDCan or Asia or something, like an extra day before or after, like the hackathon after. Anyway, that's cool. But I guess Philip Gunther brings us back a report of the event, which we will have a link to in the show notes here. So if you were watching the current CVS logs, you probably saw a flood of commits just from this event alone. So when they get together, they get stuff done, which is just really cool. But some of the notables from that, I guess they had some fixes with threading, Linux compatibility, ACPI, and some other various things that'll make it into 5.5. Nice. And of course, there's probably the usual suspects there that people want testing on. So definitely check those out. And I guess we have a link here also, another report from Theo detailing some of his work.
Cool.
What did he say in there? Do you have that link open, Alan?
About random seeding and signing and for their base system, and also hibernation support.
Oh, nice. I remember he was telling me he had that one laptop that he hasn't ever upgraded, and I forget how long it's been. Because it's been suspended and
resumed like 8,000 times or something like that.
Yeah. And he doesn't want to upgrade because then he'll have to reboot.
He wants to see, let it go until it breaks. And
that's really cool. So props to them for getting that kind of stuff so stable. That's really awesome. Okay, let's see here. They did some work in progress PF fixes, suspend resume fixes, and of course more signing stuff. So that's cool. Lots of new exciting things coming into OpenBSD 5.5 just down
and
the
they're
road.
talking about the complication of how do you do hibernation if you're using soft RAID, where you need the kernel to understand the disk. You can't just talk directly to it. It's like so, and the biggest problem area with suspend and resume, obviously video, and so they spent quite a bit of time working on that stuff.
Sure. Making that work. Well, that's cool. Okay, and I guess next up, we also have an article about NetBSD today, and I guess they dumped a bunch of new releases on us over this last week.
They did point releases on 6.1, 6.0, 5.2, and 5.1.
So I guess these are mostly bug fix releases, maybe some security updates, not necessarily focused on new features. But you can upgrade depending on which branch you're currently on. And if you're confused by all the different branches, what all those mean, we have a link in our show notes here to a nice little graph, which will explain that for you.
But yeah, so they have a subset of fixes that were deemed important for security or stability reasons. And so it's a nice minor update that you can install instead of having to apply patches manually.
Sure. Okay. That's cool. And next up, we have our last article for the week, the future of open source ZFS development. So I guess February 11th, so a couple weeks from now, Matt Ahrens is going to be giving a presentation about ZFS. Matt, for those who don't know, is one of the founders of ZFS. I did that over at Sun back in the day. The talk he's going to be giving is about the future of ZFS, though, and the open source development since Oracle closed the code. So what's happening since then and where they're going in the future. It's going to be held in San Jose, California. So if you're in the area or if you can get out to the area, go. It'll be good. If you do anything related to ZFS, I'm sure you'll come out of this enlightened and excited about the future of it. So speaking of ZFS, what's the next thing we have here, Alan?
I think that was the last article, wasn't it?
I think there's a segue into something here.
So this week's episode was brought to you by IX Systems, which is a great sponsor of the show, and they provide enterprise servers and storage for open source. So some of the cool things they do are, on top of sponsoring and running projects like PCBSD and FreeNAS, they build servers, lots and lots of servers.
Using lots and lots of ZFS.
And
that was the segue there, by the way.
Yes. And they're one of the big sponsors of the OpenZFS project and big contributors as well. They just announced the new release candidate for FreeNAS 9.2.1, which when you actually look at that, it actually kind of spells out some of the reasons why it's great to have IX as the company behind FreeNAS. On top of, upgrading Samba and improve stuff for compatibility with Windows, they've added the LSI 12 gigabyte per second SAS driver as a loadable module.
Nice.
This is still in beta, and they're working directly with LSI to write the driver, and it's not in FreeBSD yet. People are going to test it in FreeNAS and get it working, and then it'll be committed to the FreeBSD source tree. So if you're using production, they recommend you still buy the 6G adapter and use that. But in order to make sure that we're going to have this 12G SAS driver available in FreeBSD, IX, who has a special relationship with LSI, is working to get that driver built. They also made a bunch of other improvements in FreeNAS 9.2.1, including removing the non-functional share password settings from the Apple file sharing, improving Apple file sharing quite a bit, and with support for ACLs. Switch from Avahai to MDNS responder, so their zero config networking will improve Mac share browsing quite a bit. They brought back the more powerful volume manager from FreeNAS 8, so that they can you can manually create your VDEVs instead of doing the wizard. They recommend the wizard for most people, but if you're really trying to do something by hand, the old one is a little easier to do that with. They changed the way the graphs work, so they're more sorted and organized. Fixed a bug where you could have trouble encrypting a volume if you were using multipath. So if there's if each of your hard drives actually shows up multiple times from different controllers. Upgraded Django and a bunch of other stuff, and also imported a bunch of new ZFS features that are only available in head or stable currently, including the transaction group whole birth stuff, the extensible data set, and the bookmarks feature, which allows you to do replication without having to keep the older snapshots.
Oh, nice.
They also added Traf Show so that you can get a more detailed image of how the traffic is flowing in and out of your machine. And fixed the way they load the Fuse module so that you can import NTFS volumes more easily. And made some changes to make it easier to join your FreeNAS to your Windows Active Directory domain.
Oh, definitely. So this is a lot of good new features, even though it's a 9.2.1.
Yes.
Cool deal.
They're kind of riding that edge between what's a regular FreeBSD and what they're getting done.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one thing I'll mention here too, they also are asking some feedback from you guys right now. If you check out the show notes afterwards, we're going to have a link you can check. And they're asking people to go look at and vote on some of the branding for the future FreeNAS product that they're working on. Basically deciding between some different logo designs. And go pick. Maybe yours will be the one that gets selected. But that would be cool if you guys would go vote on that. But we'll also leave you with this. If you go to ixsystems.com/BSDnow, you can go and download a free guide they have there, which will give you some tips on how to buy a new server for open source. You know, all the things you probably want to know before you start getting the server all set up and have it show up and find out, oh, I needed this, I needed that.
Oh, that doesn't work like I thought it did.
Yeah. So that's really good and helpful document that they have on the website there. I believe it's a PDF, right, Alan? Yeah, so just go ahead and grab that and give it a read through if you're going to be looking at purchasing servers here in the future. And of course, get in touch with the IX guys. They will definitely customize a system to fit your specific needs.
Well, yeah, like we get questions all the time about like what hardware should I use to build my FreeNAS box? It's like, well, you can either just buy a pre-built FreeNAS Mini from IX, or you can just call them up and they will build the machine exactly the way you need.
Yeah, and you guys are always sending us questions like that too. Like, geez, just go talk to IX guys. They'll tell you exactly what you need.
They will make sure you get a machine that's going to work perfectly with FreeNAS, because who would know better than the guys that make FreeNAS and make servers, which servers would work with FreeNAS?
Yeah, which cards to avoid, which ones you want, depending on the performance, throughput, price, or, all that. So yeah.
How many hardware manufacturers have a very close relationship with LSI to get the best disk controller drivers, or to get disk controller drivers for FreeBSD before they're even out?
That's true. It's helpful having people have those connections and if you find a problem, then hey, maybe they can go get it resolved upstream, which is very cool.
So yes, definitely check out ixsystems.com/BSD now.
Okay, and we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're joined today by George Neville Neal, the director of the FreeBSD Foundation and editor-in-chief of the new FreeBSD Journal, which he's here to talk to us about. Thanks for coming on, George.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So first off, we ask everyone the same thing. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got involved with BSD in general?
Well, I've been working on BSDs since I actually worked briefly at the University of California in the early 90s. I didn't work for CSRG, but I worked doing infrastructure support for different kinds of software. What would currently be like the port system now is kind of what we did for the university, for the CS department. And through working for those folks, I wound up meeting CSRG. We'd actually have lunch pretty often. So I wound up using BSD because of that. And then shortly after that, I moved to Holland. And that was right after the BSD lawsuit got settled. And I was working on a technical project there where we were actually using Plan 9 on laptops, which was kind of difficult. So one of my colleagues and I got NetBSD running on our compact laptops, and I've been using some form of BSD ever since. Switched to FreeBSD shortly after coming back to the States, and I always run BSDs on laptops. And at the time, FreeBSD was the best of the BSDs on a laptop. So I've been on FreeBSD ever since.
So what are your current roles with the FreeBSD project?
So I'm currently a director at the FreeBSD Foundation, one of several. I am also a committer. I normally work in the networking area. I'm also the co-author of the design and implementation of the FreeBSD operating system, which I worked on almost 10 years ago, I realize now, and we're working on a revision of that.
Cool. So what exactly is this new FreeBSD journal we've been hearing rumblings about?
So for about the last 10 years, I've actually worked with ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, on a magazine called Q. And I have an interest in publishing. Obviously, I've co-authored a book. I write a column for ACM, and I've worked on a magazine. And one of the things I realized was that FreeBSD itself didn't have a really good platform for articles and information about the operating system. And forums are great, mailing lists are great, but they require a lot of work to go and find what you're looking for. And kind of what I wanted was something that would come out periodically, people could look forward to. In publishing, we call this a publishing event. You know, like every Sunday you get a newspaper and you sort of count on that newspaper being there. With a magazine, you every month or every 2 months, and in the case of the FreeBSD Journal, it's going to be every 2 months, you know, you sort of count on, oh, what's coming up next in the journal. And so the idea was to put together a magazine that would cover events and information and have articles about FreeBSD for the FreeBSD community and for other people out there. And if you go out and you look at tech publishing, if you look at physical magazines, those aren't doing so well, but it's really important to be able to see something about the system that people are using so that your name is out there and so that people can find out about you.
Right. So how did it originally come to be?
So let's see, it's now January, so maybe 9 months ago, I've been reading a bunch of, you know, the Linux magazines. I get 4 or 5 of those just to see what's going on in that community. And so I did kind of a bunch of research. I thought, okay, well, what's out there? How are people publishing? What does this look like? And then on a whim, I asked the publisher of Q, you know, how much does it cost to put together a non-paper magazine? Because one of the problems in publishing now is that publishing on paper is very expensive. You know, order fulfillment, handling subscriptions, postage, printing, paper, all that stuff is prohibitively expensive, and it's what's killing a lot of the publishing industry unless you happen to be something huge like the New Yorker. But electronic, you can save a lot of money, and in technology, you know, the technological community, most people have some sort of device on which to read. It made sense to try and put together an all-electronic magazine. So I asked our publisher, I said, okay, how much would it cost? How hard would this be to do? Having been part of an editorial board for 10 years, I kind of had an idea of what the amount of work was to get articles, to get people to write, edit those, and to get them into publication, but I didn't know how much it would cost to produce the thing and get it into people's hands. And he and I talked a bit more about it. It turns out that he's a partner in a publishing company that does that. They do niche magazines of about 15,000 readers or less, and, you know, quoted me a reasonable price, which I then convinced the FreeBSD Foundation to fund that effort for a year. So those of you who are donating to the foundation are helping us put out the magazine. And from there, I went and talked to a bunch of people in the community, and we got an editorial board together. So it's, you know, it's not just me. You've got people like John Baldwin, Daichi Goto, who's one of our Japanese contributors, Joseph Kong, who's written about FreeBSD, Drew Levine, who many people know also, and Michael Lucas, also authors of FreeBSD stuff. I got Kirk McKusick, my co-author on the D&I book, to be on the editorial board. Hiroki Sato, who runs AsiaBSD and has a lot of connections over in Japan, and finally Robert Watson. So I got, you know, some really good people from the community to come forward, people who'd written, people who'd published, and people who know people who can write, right? Because it's important to be able to go out and get material. And so we formed an editorial board. We mostly communicate via email, of course. We meet occasionally via phone. And then it's the responsibility of the editorial board to go out into the community, find people who are doing interesting work, and convince them to write about it. Because the last thing most developers think about when they're writing code is writing an article about that code. I mean, they might write a manual page, which is great. I mean, one of the nice things about FreeBSD is you've got really top-notch documentation. We've got a docs team, and the developers understand doing documentation. But they don't sit down and go, oh, yeah, and also I'll write 3,000 words about this just to do it.
Right.
So, you know, we have to go out and find them.
And unless they're, you know, academic type research stuff where they're used to writing papers, it wouldn't be something that would occur to them.
Right, exactly.
And most developers just getting out the door.
Exactly. So that's kind of the role of the editorial board. That's what they do, and that's what we do together. We also, when you put a magazine like this together, you have an editorial calendar. So the magazine is going to have 6 issues a year, And we've already got the topics for this year's issues that we're then going to hang articles on. So issue 1, which is just about to come out, or at the moment still waiting on approval from Apple. Turns out they are the most difficult to get approval from for your app. Although once you get approval, then you're fine. Right. But the first issue always takes the longest. So issue 1, which is done, and it's with all of the app stores, because we're going to come out on Kindle, Google, and Apple simultaneously. That's already done. We've got an article by David Chisnell on Clang. John Baldwin wrote us a great piece on how to implement sysctl nodes in the kernel. We've got a white paper from Joseph Kong where he worked with NYI, which is New York Internet. They use FreeBSD for managed services. Tim Kienzle, who's been doing a huge amount of work in embedded, wrote a whole thing on working with BeagleBone Black, FreeBSD, a really great article. And this guy, Alan Jude, who you may have heard of, has written about ZFS and the Z file system for us. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you for pronouncing it ZFS.
We're trying to swing them our way here.
Never.
The developers say it this way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, we also have continuing columns. So Drew Levine's doing our events calendar. We've got the ports report, which is all about what's going on in ports. We've got SVN update, which is being written by Glenn Barber, which is basically what's going on in the kernel, what's going on with SVN. And so those are going to be ongoing. Every issue you'll have that. But so issue 1 is all about FreeBSD 10, all the cool things in FreeBSD 10 and what's going on with FreeBSD 10. Other issues we've got coming up in the year are we're going to do a whole issue on networking. We're going to do something on virtualization, talk about new development tools, because we don't just have Clang, we've got LLDB coming in and all the stuff that also LLVM allows you to build. It's a really flexible system. We're going to talk about some great new hardware features. So we've got 6 issues planned out, and that's what we're planning for the year. So we're putting that together.
Cool. Well, cool. You answered several of our questions in a big chunk there, but I guess I'm trying to nail you down a little bit more here, though. So generally speaking, we know it's going to be about FreeBSD. Do you have like a target audience? Is this more for developers, sysadmin, just new users, or is it a mixture of all of the above?
So it's going to be a mixture of all the above because the FreeBSD community is pretty broad. There's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things with FreeBSD. And until we put this magazine together, there was no FreeBSD specific magazine. So we certainly didn't want to do something that was just for kernel developers or just for some segment of the market. So you see that even in the first issue. You've got embedded, you've got the Z file system stuff is definitely talking about things that people will want to deploy large systems will want. You got something for kernel developers with the sysctl article from John. So and the whole thing about Clang. That's basically not just kernel developers, but anyone developing software on FreeBSD. And we're going to continue that throughout all the issues where, we'll touch on different parts of the system, and we're going to try and address as many people as possible so we can, get people using and understanding FreeBSD better and using it more effectively for whatever they use it for.
Cool. So can anybody write for it? What's the process to do so if they're able to?
Sure. So there's a website. You can just search for FreeBSD Journal at this point, and there's a very simple website. It doesn't really have, we don't put the content up because it's going to be in the magazine, but all the contact information is there. So you can contact the board if you want to propose an article, or people can email me directly. I'm just gnn@freebsd.org, and propose a topic. Usually it helps if they have an outline, and pieces run about 3,000 words. So, and that doesn't include figures. And then, if we talk about a piece and we're going to develop a piece, then I'll introduce that person to our publisher. And it's really the publisher who gets the piece in, gets all the editing done, because that's really a big part of putting out a professional magazine is having good editing. So, yeah, anyone can write for us, and we'd really welcome people sending in pieces or sending ideas for pieces in.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things for me is after doing a little bit of docs is when I was writing this article, it's like, well, what's the correct way to format a sysctl when you're printing it in text, right? Because you need it to stand out a little bit. Otherwise, it's a bunch of words with dots between them. That doesn't make sense in the middle of a paragraph, per se. And, there's ways to do that in the doc markup, but it's like, how do you do that when you're writing for a magazine?
Right, and the nice thing is that S&W Publishing, who we're working with, and Jim Morrow, who's our publisher and who's basically leading all the editing work, he's been doing technical publishing for a long time. I mean, I've worked with him for 10 years on Q, and he's been working on technical publishing since long before then, so he has a lot of experience. He understands how to work with, people who don't spend all of their time writing, and generally he's done a really good job. Actually, he's done an excellent job on turning things like that into something that's readable. They also work with a designer who's done a really good job of, making the visual part look good so that people can sort of understand what's going on in the figures, because that's really important in a technical magazine. Is the figures are actually really important.
Right, or even just, when I sent in my article, it was just 3,100 word wall of text, and they made it actually look nice.
Hey, there you go.
That's what they do.
Yeah. So one of the other questions we had is, so the magazine costs money, and what is it?
It does cost money. It's not free.
Right. Where do the proceeds go?
So it's subscription based. So our first goal is to break even.
Right.
And then once we've gotten past break even, which I hope we will do fairly soon, then the money will go back into the FreeBSD Foundation, which that's who basically funded it to start off.
Right.
But yes, it's both advertiser and subscription supported. So you'll see advertisements in the magazine, which is great. There's people, lots of companies who want to advertise with us, working with FreeBSD and other companies. The single issue price will be $6.99, and the 1 year subscription will be $19.99. Turns out the 99s are important. All the different app stores kind of require that it be 99 cents on the end. That's why there are 99-cent apps in the store. But the magazines are always. I don't make these things up.
I know.
Just do what they say. I'm like, okay, if that works for you, and then we can do it. That's fine.
Yep. So what do you kind of see as the future of this publication going forward?
Well, so the future of the publication is that we're going to keep, trying to get really great articles in and trying to get people to write. I mean, there's always new stuff going on in FreeBSD. There's always new features. You look at the difference between 8, 9, and 10, and those releases have come out over the last 4+ years. There are features that have gone into those releases that could certainly have filled the pages of the magazine. I see one of the things I'm hoping to see is more columns. Columns help hold a magazine together, I've kind of felt over the years. So we're going to look for and try to develop more columnists around other ideas in the community, so that we have sort of ongoing work going on. And the key thing now is to get subscribers on board. We've got some advertisers. We want to get more advertisers, obviously. Get subscribers on board, and then get the material out there. I suspect a couple of the things we'll see as we continue to publish are things like conference reports. So, you've got things like NYC BSDCon coming up, and Asia BSD, and then BSDCan, and EuroBSD. All of those are great events that, we get a couple hundred people to go to. But one of the things I expect to see is that there'll be a conference report for people who, weren't able to make it, want to see what was going on. Maybe we can get someone to write about the dev summits, because the dev summits are a really, good thing for developers and for the community. But if you're not there, it's kind of hard to tell from the mailing list updates. Well, what happened? What was decided? What did people talk about? What are the important things in the next few months in development for the system? And what are people interested in, right? That's really important.
And having a little bit more control over the message, rather than someone from Ars Technica finding something on a wiki and blowing it out of proportion.
Well, there is the effect with a magazine that you actually get to have your own voice, right? And developing a voice for a magazine is actually a really important component to it. So, yeah, that's definitely the case. And we definitely... I wouldn't say we want to be in control of the message, but we want to be a participant. We want to be involved.
Yeah. And so how do you actually get the journal?
So the journal, you'll be able to get it from any one of the app stores if you've got whatever particular flavor of device works with an app store. So the Kindle store, the Google Play, and the iTunes store. Like I said, it's going to come out simultaneously on all 3 stores when Apple finally releases it. It turns out the other 2 stores take about a day, and Apple takes between 3 and 10 days. So, and they don't tell you, right? It's magically at some point you get an email saying, "Oh, by the way,
you're good to
you're
go.
ready to go." Once we're out with issue 1 and people have subscribed, they will not have that delay.
Right.
The magazine will go up, and that day that it goes up, it's there. It's the fact that you're putting out a new app, not the magazine itself, that causes the delay with the App Store.
And so you won't be able to actually read it on a FreeBSD machine?
You will not currently be able to read it on a vanilla FreeBSD machine. A couple of people obviously have asked this question. One of the problems we have is it's a subscription-based magazine, and so figuring out a way to do that with something like an Adobe Reader or some other format is something that we have not worked on yet. Right now, we're concentrating just on the stores where we know we can deal with subscribers.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what other things in general in the community can we blame you for specifically for people who maybe don't know you?
Yeah, what other things have you done?
You mean apart from the...
Yeah.
Sure. You can blame me for the book. So any errors in the networking chapters of D&I are all my fault. And any errors in the upcoming book are also going to be partly my fault. Things I've worked on most recently... some of the HWPMC stuff, that's actually, I'm hoping to do some significant rototilling on that. A bunch of us have talked about that. That code needs some work.
Right. So for people that aren't familiar, could you explain what that is briefly?
Sure. So most modern processors have something called hardware performance monitoring counters, HWPMC. If you've ever seen a tool like vTune that's using on-chip real estate in which things are counted, like how many instructions did you retire, which means how much work is your program doing? How many times did you miss something out of the level 2 cache? These are all things that you would use if you're trying to do performance analysis of your code, which is something that we want to do. As a community, the only way to improve our operating system is to be able to measure it. Right? You can't just throw features in and hope for the best. Although there are people who do that, although not on FreeBSD. We don't allow that. So I have an interest in performance, and I really enjoy messing with low-level chip things, although I have to say that I do not enjoy reading chip manuals because they're extremely tedious. But because I have an interest in performance, I've taken several cracks at improving the support of HWPMC. So I added a bunch of the counters for more recent Intel processors. I'm trying to remember. I think I added Nehalem. I may have added Westmere. So that was a lot of the stuff that I've worked on. But I'm hoping to take a crack at the rest of the code because a lot of that code needs to be modernized. It was developed in more of a single processor, single core era, and it definitely is showing its age as we get into massively multi-core machines. And also in the embedded world. So one of the things I added was really simple support for the MIPS 24K. And those processors are simpler, but you've got now more modern MIPS processors that we're running on, and then you've got all the explosion of ARM. Yep. And we really need to get some of this stuff into the ARM processors because that's really important. So that's an area that I've worked a lot on. Other things I've worked on are things that I'm working on tangentially. I'm also, I wouldn't call myself the lead developer. I'm the lead ringmaster of something called the Precision Time Protocol. And this is a daemon that runs on top of FreeBSD and other operating systems that will synchronize machines on a local area network. I've actually given a couple of talks at BSD events about this. So the latest thing I'm doing there is I'm starting to add hardware support again for better timers in the network interface chips. So if you have a distributed time protocol, the most important thing is that you remove jitter from the network. And the best way to remove jitter from your measurements is to measure down by the NIC. And modern Intel NICs, modern Chelsea NICs, pretty much all the modern, when I say modern, I mean the last 3 years, have some form of clock directly on the network interface card. And so you can read that out, and that'll give you better time. So there's a lot of people who really care about having a large number of machines in a data center be as lined up as possible. That's a very hard problem. One of the more fascinating things about that is I'd never had to read a technical paper that referred to Einstein. But it turns out when you deal with time protocols, you wind up having to deal with Einstein. You're like, oh, I'm really in trouble.
Oh, yeah. He got here first, so no.
Yeah, well, I mean, he understood the theory, but he never had to implement the code.
Right.
Sure.
So that's it. That's another area I've worked in. And then my main area of interest is, of course, networks. I've been poking around the TCP stack most of my life. I wrote something called the packet construction set, which is used for doing conformance testing of network protocols. And it's a way of, in Python, it gives you this pretty rich language for creating any kind of packet you want. It's been used a lot for security fuzzing, and for attacking IP or IPv6 code in the lab, of course. And recently found out that there's some folks who've been using it to test MPTCP, which is this the new multipath TCP that everybody's talking about because Apple put it into iOS. Multipath TCP gives you some really nice features when you need to fail over and you want to keep your connections going. Because you know that failing over a TCP connection is really hard, so MPTCP has been the solution to that. And the only reason I found out anyone was working with my code is someone sent me a patch. It's a very typical open source thing.
Actually, we had a question about MPTCP in the feedback section of the show, and we were like, we don't know that much about it yet.
Well, neither do I, but it's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, there's a bunch of RFCs out there. There's some implementations. I believe the folks, you know who Lawrence Stewart is, who's in Australia. The folks at Swinburne, I believe, are doing a bunch of the MPTCP work on FreeBSD. Cool. There's implementations for multiple OSs, obviously, and there's an implementation for iOS because it's what iOS 7 is using the failover between, say, a Wi-Fi and your 3G or your 4G radio network.
Cool. We'll have to see if we can't get somebody else to interview about that.
If you can get Lawrence Stewart, that would be great. Yeah. He's a really good guy on the TCP stuff, and he's very well spoken. He'd be a good person to talk to.
Great. Cool. So you mentioned a couple times the design and implementation of FreeBSD. When do you expect to have that finished so that we can buy a copy?
You're not allowed to ask people doing a PhD when their PhD will be done.
I didn't go to university. I don't know that.
It's an important rule. I do not have a publication date, and if I did and gave it out, Kirk McCusick would find me and kill me. We are currently writing.
Okay.
And we hope to have a draft done soon, but I do not have a publication date, and I cannot commit to that on the air.
Right. Okay.
Darn. Worth a try, though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to mention before we get going here?
Well, if people want to see a physical copy of the magazine, we are going to produce a limited set of physical copies to give away at conferences. So there are going to be printed copies. I think the first conference we'll be able to have them at will be Asia BSDCon. So for those of you outside of Japan, for the price of a plane ticket to Tokyo, you can get a free copy of the FreeBSD Journal. I'm really looking forward to seeing it in the flesh. We're only going to do a limited set and only for issue 1.
Right.
But it's a giveaway thing so people kind of have an idea of what it is.
Well, it's an important historical thing, too.
Sorry?
I say it's an important historical thing, too, to be able to point back. This is the issue that started it, you know?
So, you know, if people come to Asia BSD, I'll be there. If people want me to sign a copy of their magazine at the conference, I'll certainly do that. And we'll have them at conferences throughout the year. We'll have, you know, copies of issue 1 to give away for people to look at.
Cool. Well, we're both going to be at Asia BSDCon, so we'll see you there.
Yeah. Bring us copies.
I think they're shipping them. They're kind of heavy, it turns out.
Yeah.
Paper's heavy.
Yep. Well, cool. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today, George.
No, thanks for having me on.
Okay, in most of the BSDs, there are different branches or versions of the OS that you can use. Oftentimes, in addition to the normal releases, there's a development version with all the latest features and code. In OpenBSD, there are 3 main flavors that you can use: release, stable, and current. In contrast to FreeBSD, though, stable is just the latest release plus the security fixes and other just minor tweaks and improvements. All the development's actually happening in current, and then eventually that gets rolled into a new release after being tested. So new releases of OpenBSD happen every 6 months. Theo gave a talk at Asia BSDCon entitled The OpenBSD Release Process, a Success Story, which we'll have links to in the show notes if you want to go take a look, if you're interested in the details of the release engineering. But every May and November-ish, there's a new version of OpenBSD announced and uploaded to the FTP servers. The only update that a release will get are security and reliability fixes, and they're distributed as source code patches, which we'll have links to their FAQ on that as well. There's no automated system or mailing list that announces the security fixes. They do provide a nightly cron script, or actually we provided in our OpenBSD router tutorial, which should be sufficient for most users. If you're running released, you'll have to manually download these patches, apply them to your user source directory, and then rebuild whatever was affected. At the top of every patch, usually there's going to be some instructions on how to apply it and what specifically needs to be rebuilt. In this example, we're going to be applying a fix for OpenSSL in OpenBSD 5.4. We'll be assuming you already have the source tree installed.
So the first thing we're going to do is download the patch. So from FTP, we'll pull down patch number 5 for OpenBSD 5.4. So that pulls that down. And then, what we need to do is actually apply a patch. So the patch command basically takes a patch file, which describes, here we'll take a quick look at that patch file. You can see that it actually includes instructions at the top on how to apply this patch. So you do, switch to this directory and apply this patch, and then you have to do these things to rebuild only the parts of the system that were actually affected by this patch. And then for anybody that doesn't know, this is what a patch file looks like. It shows the original version of the file and the modified version, and it's got some context with the line numbers and how many lines there were, and the new line number and how many lines there were after, and it kind of gives an idea of where it is,
removed and added,
which function it takes place in, and then provides a couple of lines of context, which are lines that haven't changed, and then the lines that start with a minus are lines that got removed, and ones that start with a plus are lines that got added by the patch, and then some more context. And so that helps the patch tool find where in the file this goes and make the change. So instead of having to download a whole new sha512.c file, you get just this patch. And the other main advantage is if there are two patches of the file based on the same original version, you can apply them concurrently. Anyway, so now we can actually do the patch command, which you see spits out this text again and says that we've successfully applied the patch. So now we can go to this crypto directory, make the objects, to compile the new version of OpenSSL, and then at the end you do make install, and it will install the new version of that library, and now your system has that patch.
Okay.
And then you can also do make clean, which will clean up all the temporary files that were compiled as part of that. That'll save some space, although if you need to make another change, you'll have to recompile them again. So it's kind of a trade-off there between whether you have the extra space and if you think you will need those files again, because then the make will be smart and only recompile parts that have changed. Okay, so as you can see here, it's finished the compile now. So now if we just do our make install, we can see that it updated libcrypto in our user lib. So now I have that, and then we can do make clean to clean up all the temporary files.
That wasn't so painful.
Yep, and then we can remove the patch file that we don't need anymore. So yes, if you want to track current, you need to do a CVS checkout. So just make a little temporary directory to do this in so we don't collab with the other one. So if you do this CVS command, which you can grab off of the show doc, and obviously replace the mirror name there with whichever mirror is closer to you, and it will check out the CVS tree and get all the files that way. So this allows you to get versions that they don't have tarballs for. This process takes a really long time. Luckily, I did cooking show that part. So now we have a full source tree that's been checked out. Now, if you've already have done this in the past, then you can use this short CVS up command, and it will only pull down any updates that have happened since you did the original checkout. I don't think there'll be many for mine because I did my checkout a couple hours ago. But, you know, sometimes there are commits going in constantly, right?
Yeah, especially if you're in the middle of a hackathon.
So before building anything, you should check out the -current updates website, which is in their FAQ. And it will tell you about any special workarounds or requirements or things you should be aware of when you're updating. I suppose that's probably similar to the FreeBSD updating file, which has a list of gotchas and fixes and things like that. There's also the changelog, which might be of interest if you want to know what you're going to get by updating. And then to build the whole system, you need to start with a kernel. So we'll do that. So if you go to...
Well, I'll mention one thing in the notes here. It says you can only go to a current, not from. In other words, you go forwards in time, not back.
Right, there's no compatibility for going backwards. So here, what we can do is we run config generic multiprocessor. This will generate a config file, and then we can go into that directory and do make clean, make, and make install, and this will build and install the new kernel. And then you reboot and you'll be on that new generic kernel, and then you can go about the rest of the process to actually install a world, right? Because you should always update your kernel first, because the world may depend on features in that new kernel or changes to, the size of structs or whatever. And you want to make sure that, if you update your world and not your kernel, you can break everything, including like PS and top. And it makes it pretty hard to get anything done when even the most basic commands don't work properly because something changed. So, again, that'll take a while. But then you can go to your user source and do make obj, which will make all the target directories where you're going to stick all the files. And then you can compile your etc, and that will update all your etc files and so on. So you can do, again, all these commands are in the show notes in the tutorial, so that you don't have to try to copy what I'm typing on the screen. And then, if you do...
Yeah, if you're listening to this in the car while driving, don't try and pick up a pen and write this down. Just get it later.
Exactly. And then you do your make build, and that'll compile the whole operating system. And then you can also, in the, there's also a Xenokara directory. I have no idea what that word's supposed to mean, but that allows you to build the bootstrap, which looks like the stuff for X11.
Yeah, it is. Wikipedia, their build infrastructure for the customized Xorg server.
That makes sense. And that allows you to install that. And then when you're done, you can clean those up by removing those OBJ and XOBJ directories, and then reboot. So once you've done all that, you'll have a working system. And we also mentioned how to track stable as well.
Not as scary as it looks at first. I remember my first time doing a world and kernel build, and I was, sweating the whole time. Is it going to reboot? What's going to happen?
Yeah, my first one was okay. It was one of the other ones going from like 4.1 to 4.2 or something when they added the SSH sandboxing or whatever. And all of a sudden, there was this new user you had to create. And I hadn't learned about Merge Master yet. And so all of a sudden, my remote server SSH wouldn't start because there was no SSH user for the privilege separation.
Yeah.
I'm like, huh? Yeah.
Whoops.
That's what I get for not following the documentation and reading the updating file. So now I do that. That doesn't happen anymore.
No, they should rename that file "Don't read this file," and then everyone will read it.
It's like release engineering's hidden porn stash.
That's right.
Something like that. So anyway, that is how you can compile your own version of OpenBSD and run current, which is what most people do because, you want to be testing all those new features so that when 5.5 comes out, it works. So anyway, if you go to our website, there's the full version of the tutorial, which goes in a little bit more detail and covers how to do, the patches we did, running -current or -stable. And there's also a link to our other tutorial where you can get the update script to help you pull down those updates automatically.
Okay, next up, we're going to hit the weekly news roundup. We're going to quickly go through some of the notables from the last week. And first up, we have fresh pfSense news, and it looks like 2.1.1 snapshots. So what's in this new snapshot,
quite a bit.
Alan?
Security fixes, all the ones that came out for FreeBSD recently, including BSNMPD, which I think they use, NTPD, which was a big one. There was a certain command you could send to NTPD that would actually allow, it would send back a bigger response than the command you send it. And so it was some like management command that isn't really used normally, but somebody discovered that and was using it as part of a reflection attack. So by sending spoofed UDP packets with the wrong from address to NTP servers at some moderate amount of bandwidth would cause a huge amount of bandwidth to go out to that fake address you put, allowing people to do denial of service attacks against people. And since lots of pfSense boxes are controlling very, very large connections, that would be bad. And so they pushed out that update. They also updated OpenSSL. Now, the security advisor says it only applies to FreeBSD 10, while pfSense is using 8.3. But the reason is they use OpenSSL from ports, so that advisory actually does apply.
Oh, yeah.
So they've updated for that, and updated with the newer OpenSSH and bind as well.
Okay, cool.
They also made a bunch of improvements to the interface, including updating the Intel EM and IGB drivers and the IXGB and IXGBE 10 gigabit drivers, so that now the I210 and I354 NICs will work as well as the 10 gigabit cards will work in pfSense now, which is good news because I have a bunch of those I210 cards. They also made a huge number of other changes, more changes to the routing and gateway stuff, including respect the default gateway option when adding a gateway to a specific interface, more NAT firewall rules and aliases changes, including reloading the filter rules when active or not active won't break DHCPD 6 anymore. Fix a bunch of other stuff, improve the traffic shaping stuff, general dashboard and improvements, some new stuff for the captive portal, fixes for the VPN stuff, new certificate manager, load balancing, more time stuff, and lots of other stuff.
Lots of stuff, yeah. Well, cool. And I guess they also posted some recordings of their previous Hangouts.
Yes, they've been doing Google Hangouts, so those have been open to people. It looks really cool.
Okay, but it says, unfortunately, they're only for subscribers, so you'll have to wait till next month when we have Chris on, and we're going to be talking pfSense with them. Cool. Well, next up, we have FreeBSD on the Google Compute Engine. So recently, we mentioned some stuff about OpenBSD getting run on Google Compute Engine, but here's the FreeBSD one now. So, of course, there's the big obligatory warning on it. Basically says the team has put together a best effort posting that will get most, if not all of you up and running. That being said, we need to remind you that FreeBSD is being supported on Google Compute Engine by the community. The instructions are being provided as is and without warranty. Blah, 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 disclaimer here. So anyway, it looks like the couple things in the show notes here, the instructions are still a little Linuxy, assuming, wget and stuff like that. Maybe somebody should switch that to fetch. But aside from that, it's a pretty good set of instructions on how to get up and running. And
basically how to build a Google Compute Engine image and then upload it to Google Compute Engine. And then you can run FreeBSD in the Google Compute Engine. And with
cool.
the FreeBSD Foundation joining Google's trusted tester partner platform or whatever, we can see this getting better and better. Maybe even Release Engineering will produce maybe a pre-made image that you can just
an image for it.
It could be like EC2, and someone like Colin that wants to use Google Computer Engine will just step up and be like, here's some images I created that work, and you can go from there.
Cool. Okay, next up, some Dragonfly news. I guess they got an ACPI update. So what happened with that, Alan?
They got an ACPI.
That's it, huh? I guess.
And so the new ACPI version includes
anything in particular that it fixed?
Quite a bit of stuff apparently. Over at acpica.org, Unix is the version of the Intel license and what? And it basically pulls in something like looks like quite a few changes. Looking at these, lots of files that have over 1,000 lines of new code. So,
oh wow, that's a significant import.
So that looks like there's quite a bit.
Heads up to update your BIOS too.
Yes, they also say that for a lot of them, if you update your BIOS, it will take care of a bug that will be causing you ACPI problems. So.
Okay. That's good to know. We had somebody with a problem like that last week where it was BIOS upgrade, problem goes away. No big deal. Cool. Well, next up, some PCBSD news for the week. So first off, if you're still running a 10.0 RC4, we do recommend you upgrade to RC5 or to release. I'll mention that here in a moment. But you need to upgrade all of your packages, not just a few, all of them. And if you hit our blog, you'll see instructions on how to do that due to the ABI change in FreeBSD. In addition, we still need help testing GNOME 3 so we can get it into the FreeBSD ports tree and make sure it's polished by the time it gets there. And we will mention here, give me a second. There we go. Email sent. We have just announced 10.0 is out. So you can go ahead and grab that now. It is up on the website. And you're welcome to start playing with it. A special thanks to all the developers, testers, translators, and people on the docs team who made this release happen. So very excited to get this one out, and we can start pushing forward on the future. Which, speaking of the future, so next up, pretty soon here, I'm hoping the next week or two, we're going to have our first current image of PCBSD. So we're going to roll an 11 current, and then we'll label it something like February 2014 or whatever. And we'll roll that as PCBSD with the full package in gRepo, or as much as builds on current at the moment, and then release that for people to start playing on some cutting edge stuff. And then the plan is I'll try and update that probably monthly, maybe bi-monthly, depending on if there's too much churn in the tree at the time that's breaking things. But in addition, we'll do a 10 stable image as well. So keep an eye on that in the next couple of weeks, and you'll be seeing some new stuff hit the nets here pretty soon.
I look forward to running 11 current on my laptop and get all that Beehive goodness as it comes out.
Well, you know, this fella sent me a MacBook Air, and he wants to get PCBSD on it, right? And so that was part of the reason, like, oh, I need to get current now. There's some cool stuff happening there that would be helpful on this little box.
Then get it back into 10 stable, and then you can have it there. Because I imagine doing that's 10 stable will be easier to do more often than current.
Correct. Well, it hasn't diverged a whole lot yet from when they branched, but I mean, you know, a year from now, it may not be the same story. Like there was a time when you couldn't even get X compiled, just stuff's randomly broken in the ports tree. Although a lot of that I think had to do with playing.
But also,
so hopefully we won't have as much pain.
With the amount of stuff coming in for new cons and the new Intel KMS drivers that'll go into head anytime now, I'm guessing they'll start diverging pretty quickly.
There's going to be some breakage and things that need to get fixed, but that's the only reason why I'm not committing to saying this is a guaranteed monthly thing, just because when we build it, we want to build it with packages and actually have a desktop run on it and X and all that, so you can test new cons and whatnot. So we will make our best effort to do it monthly, but if it's broken, you know, we may have to wait a few weeks until the churn sorts out. Okay, well, cool. That's the wrap-up, it looks like, for the weekly news. We'll be back in just a moment with your feedback and questions for the week. Okay, first up, we have a question this week from Toby asking about ZFS USB drives. Ooh, good question. This sounds exciting. So he has a question about memory, removable drives, and ZFS. He has a file server in his hall running FreeBSD with only 2 gigabytes of memory. So naturally, the file system's UFS. He also has a 2 terabyte USB drive he'd like to back up his server onto, but he also wants to be able to access those files from Linux desktops. He's tried using UFS under Linux, but the support's really flaky and lacking, and he's worried about curdling the file system. So it looks like Linux support for ZFS is better than UFS. So he's asking, is ZFS appropriate for removable storage? And if so, is there any special way to set up the Z pool? And can a low memory system handle the ZFS drive on a temporary basis, or do you need to upgrade the RAM? I mean, I've used it for removable storage here and not had any problems. I mean, import, export, and away it goes.
I would be careful not to do a Z pool upgrade on the pool. Because if FreeBSD gets ahead of Linux, then you won't be able to import it on Linux. So you kind of stick to a lowest common denominator version of ZFS.
And if you're just moving files back and forth, odds are you don't necessarily need the new features.
You're probably not all that worried about the new bookmarking and stuff.
Bookmark feature or something,
I thought when you do cpool create, you can't specify the version to create, can you?
No, I think it just uses the default on the system, the most recent. Might be kind of neat to add that at some point.
Well, I know in FreeBSD 8.4, they purposely left it so when you create a pool, it does version 28, and then you can upgrade it if you want 5,000, so that it wouldn't break compatibility with FreeBSD 9.1.
Okay.
But yeah, so in general, low memory, it'll be okay, especially with external, it'll be less of an issue. If you're really worried about it, you can set the property primary cache to either metadata or none, and it won't use as much. It won't try to store cache everything you're writing to this external drive into your ARC. You
can turn off the pre-cache too,
the prefetch,
and that'll...
prefetch is off by default if you have less than 4 gigs of RAM. So, but there's a tunable, you can force it either way. And that one, the nice thing about the prefetch one now is that you can tune it at runtime. It's not a boot only one now. You can actually change it in the middle of a running system.
Okay.
But yeah, the other nice thing about the ZFS ARC is when you unmount or export a pool, it actually purges all of that out of the ARC, freeing up that RAM.
So you get it back.
So yeah,
and I don't really see any problem doing. I mean, it sounds like you should be good to go doing what you want to do here.
So yeah, the only caveat really is make sure you're using a version of ZFS that's compatible with everything, and that's kind of the point of feature flags, is that you'll just have to avoid upgrading the feature flags to something newer than one of your systems can support.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, cool. Well, we wish you luck with that, Toby, and hopefully it goes just as expected. I think you'll find it to be a bit more reliable than UFS, though, especially if you, like Alan said, keep it on an older version.
We'll talk about it next week because I haven't had time to look at what happened yet. But earlier today was the third OpenZFS developer office hours, and they had the guy that is the head of the ZFS on Linux project talking about some stuff. I was only there for like 10 minutes or something, so I didn't get to see everything that happened yet, but there'll be a recording of that available as well. So we'll give you the rundown of that next week.
That'll probably be in the news next week, I'd imagine, whatever was discussed there. Well, cool. Well, hopefully we answered your question well. I guess you're next up with Jeff.
So Jeff writes in about a whole home server. He says, the reason I'm writing you is I want to know if it's possible to build a home server that's his firewall, his protection, ADT, his communications
security
and
systems,
applications, and his home web server, and he wants to link his phone through an app somehow. And can you do this with FreeBSD, PCBSD, and so on? I think you can do almost all of those things on FreeBSD fairly easily. Like a firewall, you can use PF or IPFW, fairly easily do that.
Sure.
Home protection.
Communication with appliances and ADT, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. What kind of appliance are you trying to communicate with, and how does it want to communicate, and what do you want to communicate?
If you're just talking like you have the webcam out the back door, watching.
You can run FFmpeg and stream it or something. Home web servers, obviously easy. You can install OwnCloud or something if you want to be able to manage your media, video, music, pictures, and stuff like that.
Which we use for like calendars and stuff. It's great.
For like telephone, you can run Asterisk. I run the phone server for Scale Engine runs Asterisk, and that gives us everything we need. And you can get a SIP client for your phone so that you can make the phone calls to the server if that's what you're talking about there. And if you're doing something like OwnCloud, I think that has an Android app as well.
It does.
VX Connect bot, and you have an SSH client on your Android, so you can SSH into your home server and do whatever.
Could use it like Plex server or something too for like video, music, and all that.
Plex is in the port tree now as well, and BitTorrent sync, and almost anything you could think to do with it, you could do with one machine. Yeah.
Basically, if you're on a FreeBSD box, you got 24,000 ports that you could combine in interesting ways to do probably all these things.
Yeah. And he says companies are making quite a bit of money selling these systems to the public as individual things. And it's like, if you wanted just a firewall, you could use pfSense. It gives you a nice web interface. The problem with trying to do it all in one box is that appliances are designed to do one thing, not everything. And usually it's better when your appliance is designed to do one thing, because it means it does that one thing very well instead of doing that one thing very well and something else really badly.
Sure.
Okay. I'm not sure what you were looking for as far as communicating with your appliances. Which appliances?
Home automation stuff. You talking like something that turns on the heat in the house? I mean,
I was looking at a thermostat that can be controlled from an Android app. Because it's like I travel quite a bit.
I mean, I've seen ones that have Wi-Fi and stuff.
Yeah, it's like I travel quite a bit, and I would, be nice to make sure things are working. On my last trip when I went away, my furnace stopped working while I was away. It's like getting an alert on my phone about that would have been handy. But also just I travel a lot, so I turn the heat down when I'm not home. But when I'm on my way back from the airport, crank the heat up so when I get home it's warm. It would be nice. But I don't know. You need a FreeBSD server to do that. There's some cool stuff going on with like Raspberry Pis and stuff to do that kind of thing. And you can run FreeBSD on your Raspberry Pi. We hope to have a tutorial about that at some point. I just have to figure out how to record input from my Pi onto the stream.
Sure. I don't know if it would have quite all the power to do everything at once that he wants.
Well, a Pi wouldn't, no. Yeah, I just mean connecting a Pi to your FreeBSD box to let the Pi do that one part or whatever.
Do that stuff. Yeah, sure.
So next question.
Cool. Okay, next question from Remy here. He's asking, what good read supported laptops for running PCBSD? Are there any vendors that support PCBSD? Does IX Systems also rebrand like Clevo's System 76? Do we support System 76? So I've not run it personally on any System 76. We've used a lot of Lenovo's. So I'm running a T520 here. What's yours on? The T530, and we've had really good luck with that. That's they're built well, good components in there. I can suspend and resume and all that jazz. Webcam works. I mean, I think everything worked out of the box.
Everything on mine worked out of the box. I just went into the BIOS, disabled secure boot, enabled legacy boot instead of UEFI, and toggled the video card to NVIDIA only. Although I can now support the Intel, and I think you got some of that switching we got actually 10. Going. So I'm looking forward to trying that out and getting a little bit more battery life out of using the Intel.
Definitely. So I mean that would be the starting place for me. It would be starting with the Lenovo, but I've got friends who have Asus's and.
But in general, it's like if you get Intel wireless and NVIDIA video, it's probably going to work.
You're in pretty good shape. Those are the two things you want to look at. The suspend resume's a little trickier on laptops, but. Again, Lenovo's have tended to work well. Hit our forums. Just ask people what they're running, and you'll probably get some replies back pretty quick on what they like and some systems you can look at. You can even contact IX Systems because they do sell systems. They can sell desktops. I'm not sure if they're doing any laptops at the moment, but you can ask them, and they can definitely give you a recommendation as well.
Yeah, if you just go over to ixsystems.com/BSD now and tell them what you're looking for.
Cool. Okay, well, I answered his question. So next up, I guess
Niles has a question about multipath TCP. He says, we've been doing a good job on the series, and we like some of the stuff we're doing, especially the information in the interviews. And that's kind of what we liked best about that. He says, the interviews are something you really can't get out of just going to a forum or a mailing list. So his one question is, we'd like to know more about multipath TCP. He says apparently the development on FreeBSD is stalled a bit, and he's wondering what's going on there. And he says he tried applying the latest patch, but it just makes his kernel panic immediately. I'm not sure about that. I'm honestly not sure how much you have to be able, how much you can do to actually be able to get multipath TCP. Like normally when you're doing TCP, you don't have that much control over the route that your traffic takes. So it's something we'd like to look into, and maybe we can track down the developer and get an interview about multipath TCP and find out what's going on there.
That would be a good topic to do at some point.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So
we'll look into
next up we have... we'll have to check into it. No answer just yet, but we're getting there. And hopefully somebody who knows will probably be writing us right now like, you messed it. This is how you do it.
That's why we bring it up on the air, so that people will tell us what's going on.
That's right. Okay, lastly, we have Solomon this week. So first of all, he says he loves the show. Let's see. He hasn't completely switched all his systems to BSD. He loves learning more and more about the topic. He met both of us at VBSDcom, so that is very cool.
That ZFS Birds of a Feather group with us.
Cool. So one major point he got from the conference was that BSD is beholden to its users and not to some major power broker in an obscure backroom. That is true. It's community driven completely. It lives and dies on its users.
The leadership is elected by the developers every 2 years.
I mean, That's just the way they roll, and I don't see that ever changing. So he's asking if we can show him some examples of how users support BSD outside of software development. So he's a sysadmin by trade, and he'd love to see examples of what non-coders are doing with and for BSD. Keep up the good work.
Well, obvious one is documentation. I've been writing a bunch of stuff from a sysadmin point of view for the FreeBSD handbook and also the FreeBSD journal. Written, I'm not really a programmer. I don't know C, but I wrote some stuff in Shell to improve the installer. Even just testing helps a lot. One thing I've done recently is in my job as a sysadmin, I have access to some beefy brand new hardware, and a developer needed access to that hardware to improve Beehive. So it's like I lent my machine, my $18,000 machine from IX Systems to Neil for a week for him to, and he developed 2 new features for Beehive on it.
Figure out what the deal is. Sure. Well, one thing Drew just texted me here was sysadmins can also take the BSDA exam, get certified, and that's just going to promote the whole project as a whole, which is cool. One thing I'll mention too, you don't necessarily have to be a developer, but ports are super important. I mean, think about it. Most of you guys are running FreeBSD because you run some port or package that does whatever you need to do, be it a web server or email server, whatever. A lot of that porting isn't necessarily coding. Like, it's just updating. Most of it's updating versions and files. Yeah, it's just a couple make files. And a lot of times there's a lot of orphan ports in the tree. You could go find one and say, hey, this is something I'm interested in. And it may be as simple as just bumping the version numbers, testing it with a utility, and then committing it. And getting involved in ports, there's ways you can get in touch. They mentioned it patches,
on the quarterly newsletter there that there are currently 1,900 open PRs, and they want to work on getting that number down. So even just going through and if you know the answer to some of those, or can write, someone says, hey, the version of this is out of date. If you can write the patch to get that sorted and reply to that PR with that patch, then someone can commit it and that PR can be closed. So that's what I did. Like when we were using, we found this new cool DNS server, GDNSD, that we use. It's like half of our business is based on using this app now for our load balancing. And there wasn't a port of it. I had to install it by hand. And I was like, well, if I looked into it, it took me like 20 minutes to come up with the make file, and then another couple hours of learning on how to do it properly after that, and a little mentoring and so on.
The right way.
And then, I made it more advanced recently, so I had to learn some more stuff. But there's a nice porter's handbook with that, and it kind of gets you started. And now there's a couple of ports that I run, and there's actually a bunch more that I've been meaning to do. I just haven't got around to. I do quite a bit of stuff with Puppet, and currently the Puppet database, I don't think there's a port for that, because the install instructions are just full of Linux-isms, and if I can convert that and make a port out of it, then that means everybody in BSD can just have it instead.
So 2 more ways I'd mention. First of all, you did this already, but going to the conferences, that's a great way to show your support. You're getting involved in the community. That's important to show companies, wow, they had this many people at a conference. Obviously, there's some interest there.
EuroBSDCon having a record number of attendees last year, that is a strong message that, things are growing, not shrinking.
Yeah. You went to VBSD. I mean, it's probably a little late to get out to Asia BSDCon in a couple weeks, but maybe Canada, which is May, I believe.
I think
those are the kind of things, if you or your company can get you there, sponsor you to go there, and maybe you can even do a talk on being a sysadmin, submit something. I mean, it doesn't have to be a programmer's talk. It can just be, this is how we solve this problem using BSD.
At BSDCan last year anyway, I think a third of the talks were focused on sysadmin. There's like one track on developers, one track on like hacking and security and other stuff, and then one whole track on sysadmin. That's where I did my talk.
And a huge percentage of developers are sysadmins too, I'd say. So, and even those of us who aren't professionally, what are we doing? Like Alan, you're running your own router, based on BSD, so you're doing sysadmin stuff either way. Lastly, I'd mention though, and this has been helpful in our community, is developers, sysadmins, documentation people. If you can just get involved in the community, in other words, get on the mailing lists, get on the forums. There are so many questions that get asked that just don't get answered just because of the sheer volume.
We try to address some of that with the show.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here. But just sometimes all you need to do is be that first point of contact with somebody coming into the community. Maybe they're switching from Red Hat to OpenBSD or FreeBSD or something. And you just answer a quick question on, hey, as a sysadmin, how do I install this package or tweak Apache to do FreeBSD? That's a big deal.
And having somebody there that answers your question and was polite about it can make the difference between that person sticking around or that leaving. I helped someone.
I mean, that person may be a developer in a couple of years.
Like I helped someone in the free BSD Freenode channel yesterday with he had a virtual machine that had a 20 gig drive, and he got it upsized to an 80 gig drive, and he needed help resizing. And it's so you have your swap partition at the end, so you need to delete that and then resize the partition, but leave room, and then create the swap again, and then through OFS and. He ran into trouble where he's using the system, so he had to
day-to-day sysadmin stuff. That's honestly not something you had to go program or open up a C file and figure out how to do.
That one, I hadn't had any experience with it before because all my machines are hardware, so they don't. The size of the hard drive doesn't just change. But when I got a Raspberry Pi, the image was 2 gigs and my SD card was 8 gigs, so I learned how to expand it.
Sure.
And so just walking someone through that, it only took like 5 minutes, but that might have made a big difference for that person with them sticking with having their server be FreeBSD instead of being like, oh, I couldn't figure out how to do it, so I switched to Linux.
Yeah. Well, cool. Hopefully that's some good ways you can get involved there, you and others who are out there hearing us today. If there's something you can do to community, no matter how small or big, it doesn't have to be, just do something. And that's just going to help the community overall.
On February 8th, there's the New York BSD Con. And their theme is BSDs in production, but the message that we're trying to get across isn't just, we're not looking for talks about, hey, you can do this on BSD too. It's about why doing, your firewall on BSD is better than doing it on Linux, right? Not just that, FreeBSD can be a firewall too. It's that, FreeBSD has PF, which is way better than IP tables. Yeah. Or, if you...
FreeBSD is a better file server because of
ZFS.
this,
and things like that. And I think, but every little bit you can get involved, whether it's just, evangelizing or if it's documentation or just helping out in the chat room or on the forums or writing tutorials or whatever you can do.
Cool. Okay, well, hope we answered your question, Solomon, and hope to see you at another conference in the future. That's cool. Keep on coming out to them. So that's the end of the weekly show. As usual, all the tutorials are going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv, and I think it may already be up there right now, Alan. But send your questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the only place we're going to monitor, so no YouTube comments or Reddit or whatever. Send it right there if you want us to see it. Of course, you can watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1900 UTC. And we have something special to announce. What was that last week about T-shirts?
We're working on a T-shirt design right now. We hope to have something for you guys to preview and make sure everybody likes it, and then we can start the process of getting T-shirts. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. Maybe we'll be handing those out at conferences down the road. That another reason to come out to a conference. You can get your official BSD Now shirt. Totally the place to be. SD.
Yep.
Right.
And just a reminder, like we just said, if you're in the New York area, the New York BSD Con is February 8th in Manhattan. And then also a reminder that next week we'll announce the winner of our tutorial contest to win the FreeBSD pillow.
Oh, cool.
So hurry up and get your tutorials in so that we can judge them and pick a winner for next week's episode.
Okay, excellent. And definitely check the link if you want to see what that pillow looks like. It's pretty darn impressive.
I'm hoping to get mine any day now. I bought one for myself.
Cool. Excellent. So thank you guys so much for being with us on the show today. We hope you enjoyed it and found some of this informative. And just leave you with this. Go out there and get involved. No matter what capacity, find a way to get plugged in. And you never know. One thing leads to another. You might be editing that C file next thing you know.
Yeah, it's, when I mentioned it's like, oh, I'm not a programmer. What am I going to do or whatever? I think it was Peter Hessler, our very first guest on BSD Now. It was like, when I started, I didn't know C either. It's like, I had to learn it in order to do stuff. And it's like,
that's right.
I didn't know that much shell until I started writing the the stuff for the new installer, and then I learned a bunch, and then
it just one thing leads to
and then I
another.
ended up writing this really nice tool with the help of Devin Teskey in the middle of the night at VBSDCon in a conference room. There was myself,
Remember,
Devin.
Not everyone's a Hendrix the first time they pick up their guitar. Exactly. Even when he picked it up, he sucked when he started.
It was me, Devin Teskey, and Michael Dexter in a room in the corner at like 3 o'clock in the morning at VBSDCon. Everybody else is either drinking or sleeping, and I was writing a ZFS replication script, and that now powers the PCBSD download mirrors. It does a much better job than the old one. You've noticed we haven't had desync problems all the time anymore.
No, it's been reliable, which is good. That's fantastic. Well, excellent. So thank you guys for being with us. Look forward to having you guys watch the show next week, live again, 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you then.